Hello, it's Colin McCormick here from Video 99 Audio and Video Transfers. A little while ago I did a video on YouTube about the Betacam digital audio recorder, and I will cover that again a little bit. But I also showed some of the audio equipment that I run here. And one or two people have asked to see some of the other equipment in my studio, so I'll briefly go over some of the equipment we have in the studio here, mostly video with some audio equipment too, and later on, if you like, ask to see something of particular interest to you, and I'll work through. Eventually I'd like to be able to do videos on all the machines, but it all just takes so long. But let's see if there's anything of particular interest here, since there are some quite unusual machines in here. Right, let's start the tour. This particular piece of equipment is rather wedged into a corner because it's so bulky. It's definitely not my favourite place to have any piece of equipment. But what we have here is digital audio processing equipment on UMatic. So the key item here is the PCM 1630 digital processor, and that's connected up to looks like a fairly ordinary UMatic machine. But this is a special version of UMatic player with extra heads and different connectors, specially designed for use with the PCM 1630. It gives you a very important feature which you might just about be able to see on the display, which is called RAR, which I believe is called read and read. So it can read the tape on two passes of the heads going past the tape on the drum, and try to correct for errors, which is almost an admission by Sony that the format is somewhat fragile, and errors were a problem. And actually I've got a machine at the top here which I don't use, but it's available for, if you wanted to, for recording, which actually counts and logs errors, and you can print it out on a printer, which is again just kind of saying, you know, errors are a fact of life on this format. But this was the way that CDs were mastered. This was needed for mastering CDs in the early days, and in fact the specification of CD was based on the capability of this equipment. It records in NTSC effectively on the tape. I've also got a PCM 1610, which is a slightly earlier version, and a PCM 100, which is a cheaper version, but since the 1630 will play back all of those tapes, this is the machine to use. It's quite a rare piece of equipment. This particular one only has analog outputs. I've got analog outputs cables here, and I can plug them into one of my digital audio recorders. There is a upgrade option to allow this to output a digital format, and I'm afraid I can't do that. It actually, one of the strange things is when you've got that installed, it kills the analog audio output. Anyhow, there is the PCM 1630, quite a rare machine, and just one of my UMatic machines. So since we're here talking about UMatic, I'm not going to power up every piece of equipment I've got, but I powered up that one because it looks pretty. We have some more UMatic equipment. We've got here a VP7040, which is a multi-standard player, so NTSC, PAL and CCAM, but it'll only play low band tapes, so it's of limited use, but occasionally does the job. And a VP9000, this is actually a NTSC, a pure NTSC machine, so I've got a 110 volt transformer for that. Then VO9850, I particularly like one feature of this machine, which is it has a video level, so it gives you the RF output of the tape. Very helpful if you've got a tape with low RF output. You start to realise where your problems lie, that it's a bad tape rather than something you're doing wrong. And a little bit more UMatic equipment. So we have the broadcast, so-called broadcast. I mean, UMatic was never really true broadcast, but a sort of broadcast grade machine, which is the BVU 850p. These only play high band and SP tapes. If you put a low band tape in there, it comes out in glorious black and white. It's not the most useful machine I've got here, but now and then it's come in handy. Now here we have a the 9800, which is very similar to the 9850. A couple of features are different, and unfortunately it lacks that lovely RF output meter. But actually that is one of the machines I use most, and the way I use this, I get really great results from this, courtesy of a time-based corrector I have here, which has got UMatic dub connectors on the back. So it's connected via a roundabout fashion to that machine, and that gives the very best possible results, because instead of going down to composite video, it keeps the luma and chroma separate in a similar way as S-Video does on more modern equipment. But it also takes the RF output feed, that's to say the output from the heads, from the video recorder, and applies its own digital dropout compensator when it sees the RF output falling low. So it gives absolutely super results. That is the holy grail, really, I think, of getting the very best out of UMatic. Now, underneath that, we have something at the other end somewhat in terms of vintage and performance. We have a Panasonic HD 1700 DVC Pro HD machine. Rather like the natty display on that one. And this plays NTSC and PAL and DVC Pro 50 and DVC Pro HD tapes. So it's kind of got it all covered. And you might say, well, that's it, don't need any more DVC Pro equipment. But actually I do have a machine which I quite like, and we'll just swing ourselves all the way over here to have a look at another DVC Pro 50. So this is DVC Pro 25, this is the early version, and 50 in both NTSC and PAL. And the bit of a failing of DVC Pro decks is very few of them have a firewire output. You can get it as an option on one or two decks, but it was quite rare. So one of the items I have here is a Canopus ADVC 1000, which will take the SDI output feed from the Panasonic DVC Pro 50 and convert that down to firewire, which allows us to get DV-AVI files, which is all a lot of customers want. Sure, I can get higher bitrate files from DVC Pro 50, but very often customers just require DV-AVI files, which the Canopus allows us to do. And that also is connected to a DigiBeta. So that's DVC Pro. We'll move on in just a moment to some more. Moving on, we have Betacam SP. Now, don't get me started on why Beta was so much better than VHS. There are certain family trait connections between Betamax and Betacam. One thing is that the tape is the same size on the small size tape here, so that's why that looks like a Betamax tape, but it's actually Betacam. Everybody in the industry knows this because Betacam was the de facto format in all TV studios for many, many years. We can talk a little bit later about what the VHS people did to counter it and how that was a disaster. But there is Betacam SP. Now this won't play the earlier Betacam oxide type tapes, but we do have a machine elsewhere that will. We also used to have a BVU 22P, I think the number was, which played both. But they lacked very good quality outputs. It was composite only on that, so I don't use those anymore. They didn't have a time-based corrector either. This has a time-based corrector, and it's also connected to this rather wonderful remote control. So I still very much like these machines. They were expensive in the day, and now they're really 2 a penny. Very low value, unfortunately, now, despite being superb quality. Now, we moved on from analog Betacam over time to digital Betacam. So let's switch on our DigiBeta here. And this one, the DVW A510P. This is capable of playing analog tapes too. Not all machines of this type can, this one can, so I can pop the same tape in there. Lovely. And this one is connected to one of my computers here via SDI link for capturing. Primarily I use this for digibeta capture to quite large video files, which some people require for broadcast use. Got them set up for, it does a tone and test card colour bars when it's not in use. That's the player only, and over here, hiding behind some other equipment, we have a recorder as well. Again, these used to cost a huge amount of money in their day, and now they're not particularly valuable, unfortunately. Now, for the oxide tapes and a few other reasons, I will sometimes use this machine here, which is the J3. I've got a couple of J3s. This is the one that's got the SDI output, so I use this one most. There's one with analog only outputs way up there against the ceiling. Both of these are good working units. And again, they're not worth a huge amount these days, but that other one you saw a moment ago, I think I paid £2,500 for that back in the day. Now you can pick it up for less than 100, I should think. So a very similar looking machine to this J3 is, again hiding behind a remote control here, is HDCam JH3. I hadn't done my homework when I bought this. I thought, in the same way as the J3 wonderful machine can play analog tapes, it's going to power up, yes, could also play analog tapes, I had assumed, without having done any homework, that this HDCam machine, so that's high definition, would play standard definition digibeta tapes, and it doesn't. It will just spit them straight out again if you put a standard def tape in there. So that's high definition only. This does not play the HDCam SR variant, which is an even lower compression, and I would like to get hold of such a machine one day, but right now that's my only HDCam deck. If we're talking about high definition, you'll see here I've also got a HDV. Now this particular one supports 1080p recordings as well as 1080i, and I've also got one that does 1080i only, which looks very similar, but there's a subtle difference in the model numbers. So those tapes I do get in from time to time, and they are captured in full HD quality. We've also got quite an assortment of these little DV cam decks. This is a DSR11, a good workhorse video recorder, great for standard definition in DV and DV cam, small and large tapes, and it's got a terrible design flaw in that this front door, these hinges are very weak and they have a habit of breaking. And it's got another small design flaw, actually I'll tell you about. If you're silly enough to stick a label on the front of your mini DV tape and you put it in there, there's a fairly good chance it will get stuck in the machine and you'll end up in a right old mess, because it doesn't ever get round to ejecting the tape, and it'll just sit there clicking and ticking away, and you end up having to strip the machine down to dig the tape out, which is annoying. Guess who that's happened to once or twice. So always look out for sticky labels on the front of the tape where the lid goes. They can foul some machines. And while we're on DV briefly, we've also got hiding down here, now what's the model number of this lovely Sony? This is a DV, mini DV, but it can also do DV cam playback. That's got the drawer out at the moment. It's got a control panel which you can pop out of its drawer. And the model number on that one, DHR 1000 UX, I think it is, something like that. Really nice machine. I use it actually less for playing tapes than I do for shuttling tapes backwards and forwards to find out how long they are. From what I remember, this model does not support what they call E2E firewire, so you can't digitize an analog source via that, or at least I've not managed to do it, which is a bit of a shame because otherwise that would be quite a useful feature. So I think we've done all the DV decks. Let's move on to something else. Let's briefly look at this. This is a Sony EVS 9000E High 8 deck. It looks quite similar to the big DV deck we looked at a moment ago. Clearly they come from the same stable. And this one supports PCM digital audio tracks as well as AFM analog audio. So that's a fairly unusual feature. It's also got a digital time-based corrector, and I've got several of these, and I don't use them very much anymore. They are getting a bit old. They're a bit expensive to maintain. The parts are difficult to get and expensive. The capacitors dry up in the digital time-based correctors. Some of them, depending on the serial number, have a design bug in that every time that hits a glitch on the tape, if it's a stereo tape, it will flash stereo on the screen, which is extremely annoying. They solved that on the later serial number ones. So, yes, it works, but not a machine I use as much as I used to, unless there's some special reason, if somebody's got a PCM digital audio tape. In fact, while we're talking about PCM digital audio on 8mm, we'll also wander over here to a machine I've just the other day fixed. This was sent to me by a customer as a trade-in, and I thought, oh, go on, I'll try and fix it, and I succeeded. So what is it? It's the EVS 1000, and first time I've ever actually seen one of these things working. I've actually, since I've repaired this thing, had a few small defects. And again, this has got PCM audio, but this one lacks a digital time-based corrector, so to be honest, it's not hugely useful. What do I use for playback of 8mm for most of the time these days? Well, actually, a lot of the time I actually play back 8mm on something like that, which is a Digital 8 camcorder. That one's a TRV 120E, which is probably the pick of the crop, because they have a digital time-based corrector built in. They can digitize via FireWire. They really do give very good results as well. Okay, they don't have PCM digital audio, but apart from that, they pretty much cover it. So they're a good way to digitize tapes as DV AVI files, which is what most customers want with 8mm tapes nowadays. So I've got a fleet of those things, and have to keep those maintained as well. Okay, briefly on 8mm, I did mention 8mm the other last time we were doing an audio thing. Mentioned these gorgeous machines, the DTRS format, which records pure digital audio on high 8 tapes. The 98HR there, the one at the bottom, is 24-bit. Then there's DA88, which started the format off in the beginning. I think it's 16-bit, and a very similar PCM 800, which is almost a clone of the one above. Different connectors at the back there. And finally, whilst briefly talking about 8mm audio, we've got the EVS 800, which can record, is it 6 tracks, I think, of stereo audio on a tape. So there's another audio format for 8mm. Okay, to a different format. This is a machine that's got a special place in my heart, because this Sanyo VTC M40 Beta Hi-Fi video recorder actually started my business when it started out as a hobby, going from, in those days, from beta to DVD. Of course, very few customers take DVDs these days, they all take video files, but that was my very own Beta Hi-Fi video recorder, which I started the business with. And Beta's still important. I've got a number of Beta Hi-Fi video recorders here. So the Sony ones are nice too. Actually, these HF 100s are my favourite machine. I've got 2 or 3 of those. They work very well indeed. But I've also got some other more obscure beta machines like this. This one here, yes, there's a slight clock fault, which I've not managed to resolve, but that's a CCAM capable machine, and it's a very capable machine because for some reason sometimes I get a tape that just won't play in anything else or won't give me satisfactory results, and this machine will play it. I think it's something to do with the filter design in the way they've made it CCAM compatible. Somehow it manages to recover tapes which do a lot of black tailing from highlights, which is a bandwidth response issue, which looks like worn heads, but very often it's actually caused by tape degradation. So that's a special machine to me. But we also have some multi-standard machines here. A little bit dark, unfortunately. Let's see if I can switch those on. I forget the exact number, but these are NTSC and PAL and CCAM capable beta machines. Two of them. I'm sorry, I fitted a blue LED in one of them. Apologies. Though I found, possibly due to the compromises necessary in making the heads capable of reading all those systems, they don't always give the best results. So I've had a Sanyo True NTSC machine here from Deepest Darkest America with another 110 volt transformer, and sometimes that gives significantly better results on NTSC tapes than do the multi-standard machines. We also have, way over here in the audio system, an SLC9. Let me see if I can power it up. I can't quite remember what switches I have to flick to power that up. There we go. So we have a C9, and you might say, well, what's it doing over in the audio section? It's coupled to, if I can find it, here we are, the one right above it is coupled to this PCM 701ES digital decoder, right below it I should say. This thing's had a modification which allows it to have a pure digital output, and in fact the LED you can just about see there is a further modification to the modification where I've fitted the clock locked LED on it. I'm not having much luck actually with this circuit there. That's from a company that's no longer in existence called Whistlewood. Sometimes I find it unlocks on some tapes, so it's not great, but there it is. That's only if I want pure digital output. For analog output it works absolutely beautifully every time. And indeed this is a PCM recording. Oh, perhaps I'll demonstrate that another time. If anybody wants me to see that, anyone wants to see that running, I'll do that. So that's the beta format. I've got some other odd beta machines kicking around as well, but certainly for most jobs the range machines you've seen covers them off. Is VHS worth mentioning? Well, maybe a little. This is my favourite machine. It's AG4700, which I think is essentially the same, apart from the colour scheme and the remote, to an HS1000, something like that, which is the same machine effectively. These just give great results. I just love these. So I've got a suite of about 4 of these. But other machines exist because sometimes you find a tape that'll only play on something else. So I've got some JVCs as well. All of them being Super VHS. The outputs are taken from the S-Video connector, so you get slightly better chroma response, and they're all fed into these digital time-based correctors. So these are the GTH Electronics ACE converters. They can do multi-standard conversion and give you what they call a proc amp, which allows you to make various adjustments. For example, shifting the colour up, because VHS very often the colour, subsequent generations you find the colour drops relative to the luma, so that's useful. You can put it up, and most of these I've had special firmware put in. I've got about 10 of these. Apparently I've got the biggest collection of these Ace boxes in the country, according to the chap who used to build these. A few other interesting features, I suppose, for VHS. I've got some nice multi-standard machines here. So there's a JVC and an Akai between them. They cover off CCAM and anything else. Of course, most machines will play NTSC or PAL, so these are primarily used for CCAM. So that's VHS. Now, of course, as we all know, VHS had the domestic market but didn't really have the professional market. So whereas Betamax became Betacam, VHS tried to counter with their professional, sorry for the rubbish here, their professional version or take on a VHS sized shell, and such we have the M2 format. Now this is one of my machines. I've also got a couple of portables that all work, and I've also got a camera backpack which doesn't work. And these take small size tapes akin to VHS-C, I suppose, and the large tapes of VHS. And maybe that was the failing of the format, because the large tapes weren't big enough to hold enough tape. So the tape had to be very, very thin. The mechanism's incredibly complicated, and it was a doomed format. So very few of these things left working. They're not particularly reliable either. But a big machine that can give good results given the right tapes. Another VHS variant here. This is a special SVHS deck which can record 16 or 20-bit digital audio onto SVHS tape from Alesis, called ADAT. This is type 2 because it's a 20-bit, and I've got the unit above there which allows me to take a digital output as SPDIF out to a digital audio recorder. It's kind of the SVHS equivalent of the Tascam DA98 or similar that we saw earlier. So here's another slightly unusual machine. Do excuse the mess and the lack of light. Let's see if I can make that slightly better. V2000 format. Most people know what it is. Double-sided tape. So this is a Grundig 2x4 Super. I prefer the results from these machines to the Philips, such as we have over here. I've got some kicking around in case I've ever needed. VR 2000 and something model machines. I don't like them terribly much. I prefer the Grundig 2x4 Super. Also in my junk hole outside I have a 2x8, and one day I might get around to fixing that, just in case I ever get any of the long play recordings on V2000. Okay, another obscure format, reasonably obscure format, was Philips N1500, N1700 and later SVR from Grundig. Now these take these very large tapes where the tape starts on the bottom and works its way to the top. You may have seen these. You can look them up on Wikipedia and such. So I have a 1500 or 1502 there. All these are modified with video output sockets at the back, even if they didn't have them originally. So there's 1500, and we have a 1700 here, which again, video outputs on the back, and some video routing to allow me to switch between these formats as necessary. And here's the rare one, of course. I mean, the others are rare, but this is ridiculously rare. This is the SVR 4004, which allowed you to record up to 5 hours, I think, on one of these tapes. And as you can see, all this gear is working. So, quite rare. This one took some repair. It wasn't easy. And again, I've modified this one to have AV outputs. If anybody's interested in how I did that, let me know, because there isn't any obvious information on how to do that out in the wild, but I've figured it out. Just in case the machines I've shown you so far are too ho-hum and ordinary, here's something unusual. It's a format called CVC from Technicolor Funai, and this is the very unusual Technicolor Video Showcase. I've actually got 2 of these. Here we go. What a sweet little machine. And Those two machines I have are PAL, and I also have the portable version in NTSC. But I like the showcase ones not only because they've got a nice screen, but because if you need to take it apart to clean the heads or something, it's a lot easier to dismantle than the smaller unit is. This format failed miserably, in part because the mechanism has some design faults, some plastic expands and jams up. So they're quite rare, at least working ones are. Also very rare is this Technicolor video head cleaning cassette, which is a marvellous thing that I've never managed to quite get to work because I can't understand the instructions. And anyway, I think I prefer to take the machine apart and clean the heads by hand. So, like I said, I have two of these, complete with their wonderful grey cases. There's the other one. And also, hanging out in my storeroom, I have other accessories such as camera and tuner, so you could actually record TV programs. Strangely, the tuner didn't include a timer. So if you want to know more about the CVC format, I could do some more detail on that. And finally, to wrap up for today, Laserdisc. We have a few Laserdisc machines, such as this rather wonderful thing that also does DVD. This is an NTSC only one. I've had a lot of trouble with remote controls with these. Been trying to get exactly the correct remote control for this particular model, and have a lovely collection of remote controls I've bought now, none of which work this particular machine, so that's a little depressing. There were apparently several different code variants, and I don't have the correct one for this machine. Well, I hope you've enjoyed looking at some of the equipment in my studio here. It's by no means all of it, but I've shown you most of the video and a little bit of the audio equipment today. If you'd like to see some more detail on some of the machines, or some of the formats, a bit more explanation, and some of the information about modifications I've made, let me know, and I'll try to do those when I get a moment, but obviously I'm extremely busy, so bear with me a little bit. And I hope you've enjoyed looking through some of my obscure equipment today. Do leave some comments below, and of course like the video, share it and all that sort of thing. Bye for now.